Okay, so this week, or this episode, I should say, it's pretty much going to be today. We're going to do the HydroBoost. So I'm gonna start just by taking all this stuff out, and then Bob's going to help inspect. He wants to be on camera, so he's coming over here now. Anyway, so we're going to take all this stuff out. And then we're going to have to make a bracket for the HydroBoost that holds it at a good angle for the master cylinder. This firewall is actually very flat, so it should be pretty easy. Everything should be nice and square. A lot of cars, I mean, even square bodies and stuff are slightly at an angle, so their brackets are offset if you try to use one of those brackets. But I'm going to make one that'll bolt in just like the factory booster. And that's how we're going to adapt it. So that way we don't have to drill extra holes in our firewall. And while I'm under there, I'm going to look at how to put a hydraulic cylinder on for clutch and stuff. I'm just going to kind of look at that and get that in my mind. I won't really talk about that too much, but that is something that I want to do because I really want to get a man card back and put a stick shift in this thing. So anyway, some development on our serpentine and our power steering pump. That pulley did work on there the way it was. And I know I talked about that last week, but I went ahead and ordered a serpentine setup for it. It was really inexpensive since all we have is a power steering pump and an alternator bracket. And the reason I went ahead and did that and I just gave up right away on trying to find factory parts is because the offsets were all wrong and I would have had to modify the brackets a bunch. And then there isn't a crank pulley that was factory that would ever bolt onto this. Because the bolt pattern in the Pilot's bigger, and they never put serpentine on a Pontiac V8 like this series of Pontiac V8s. So anyway, I went ahead and just ordered the kit. It wasn't very expensive anyway, and the main reason why I did that is because right now, wherever we put the power steering pump, the cooler or the return lines are, the return lines are constantly in the way in its field of adjustment. So I really need that in a fixed location, which it will be with that new serpentine setup. The tension's all done by the alternator, and the power steering pump's going to stay right where it bolts up. So that way I can position those right for our steering shaft. So that's another reason why I did it that way. So that's that. So I'm going to start. I'm using a syringe. This is just, you get it at a farm feed store, you can buy them online I'm sure, but I'm going to suck all the fluid out so we don't make a mess. I don't want to screw up the paint in here. It's actually pretty nice even though it looks probably pretty bad on camera. It's just dusty. But anyway, so I'm going to suck all the fluid out so we don't make a mess. I'm going to get this thing all apart and then we'll look at what we're going to have to do to adapt that HydroBoost to it. The HydroBoost just has a one center nut as a pilot on the back, so we just make a bracket basically and bolt it on with that giant nut that they give you, and that's how we'll mount it on there. So I'm going to make it so we don't have to drill any extra holes in the firewall, hopefully, so that thing will just be clean, and if we ever wanted, we could put a brake booster back on it without having to modify the car again. So that being said, here we go. I'm going to get going on this. All right, so quick summary of what's going on. I got it off, everything came off super easy. That took just a couple minutes. So immediately we run into a problem with how long this nose is in relation to here. So worrying about not having enough pedal throw if we were just to mount this straight onto the firewall and have it sticking through the firewall. So I don't want to do that. So we're gonna have to space it off the firewall a little bit, but I'm gonna measure how much throw we actually need. Just judging by the way they machined this, I would say that they think we need about 1.5 inches. That's just my guess on where they machined that thing, why they machined that like that. But I'm gonna double check that and make sure. Even 1.5 inches doesn't seem like it would be enough, but maybe it is, I don't know. So anyway, this pattern is completely symmetrical, which makes everything really, really easy to design. And then the other one problem I have, just really quick, so I got this would be off square body Chevy, and square body Chevys never came with 4-wheel disc brakes, so all the master cylinders meant for this one have, you know, a master cylinder meant for disc drum, which is 2 different bore sizes. Then I went this morning and I went and grabbed a master cylinder that would have been on a HydroBoost on like an early Duramax. That's the first trucks that I can think of that came with disc brakes and HydroBoost, 4-wheel disc brakes and HydroBoost. But the bore is too big; it doesn't fit in there. So now I'm either going to have to make an adapter. So the adapter would have a pilot bore, and then the bore in it that master cylinder would fit in. The bolt pattern is the same. It's just the bore size is too big, so it doesn't fit in there. But anyway, I'd like to use this master cylinder. If I can find a different one, I know it doesn't have to be HydroBoost. The master cylinder doesn't have to be meant for HydroBoost. It works the same. It's the same either way. But so I basically need to find a disc brake master cylinder that will 4-wheel disc brake master cylinder that still has that bore. I have an idea, and that would be like a 94 to 96. Caprice has a pretty good. They have this aluminum plastic combo. That one would have a disc brake, 4-wheel disc brakes. So that might work. But if the bore is smaller, so I'm going to look into that one a little bit. That'll probably be a cheaper master cylinder than this one anyway, so then I can just return this one and exchange it for that one. Anyway, I'll look into that a little bit before we start making adapters and stuff. But either way, I got to get this thing on there, and that's really what this episode's all about anyway. So I'm going to start designing up a adapter. I'm going to figure out how much throw we need, and then we'll be back with my pencil sketch of what we're going to do, and whether or not we're going to decide to try to cut that ourselves or have it cut out. Okay, here's my plan. I have quite the plan here. We need 1.5 inches of stroke on this rod, which is that is what that bevel was put there for. That's full stroke. So once that gets all the way in. So that means that we're exactly 1 inch short, or 1 inch long. So we need to space everything out 1 inch. So once I find all my materials, we'll stack them up so that we'll have this plate is going to be bored to fit that. This ring will weld onto that, and then I'm going to turn it so it looks really nice on the lathe. And then our 4-bolt flange bearing then will bolt on, our 4-bolt flange will bolt onto this size with the same size bore as that. So now we have the predicament of how we're going to tighten that nut while it's down inside there. So I came up with this tube, which once it doesn't have burrs on it, fits in there really good. I'm going to weld flats on it so that'll be our nut driver for that. And then on this side I'll put this, and then I'll weld a nut on there so that we can actually use a wrench, basically like this, to tighten our nut down. And we're going to come back through after I bore that center hole. That's 1 5/8. We'll weld that tab on. So that's the plan there. I am going to look into just cutting this off and maybe using this plate just putting it back basically. And so that'll be welded on there, and I'll just cut the bore out so it's the same size. But if this is too thin, we'll come up with something else. I'm not sure what thickness plate they use there, but at least we could use it as a template if I cut it off of there. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do there. Yeah, so that's that. I'm gonna start welding it. I'm gonna turn it down and stuff, and then we'll be back here when we go to figure out exactly how long everything needs to be. Okay, so I got it all welded up. I did end up just using that's just the part. I cut it off. I cut it off of there, off the booster, and then I just cleaned it up. It's heavy duty enough since we're so wide on our circle there. So everything should be good. It's definitely stronger than it was before. I erred on the side of too long on this because we could always go shorter if we need to. I didn't want to make it too short and then have us not be able to put it together. I ended up just using a knockout punch on that. I didn't think it could do that thick, but it did it no problem. And then I welded a tab on it. And then I just clean that tab up with a Dremel tool, which goes really fast. That's pretty much how it welded on this side. I got a pretty good shape. Everything fit on there really good. So let's see, where'd my tool go? Here it is. There's my tool that I was talking about. So I just welded basically 1/4-inch key stock on there, but it's not 1/4-inch key stock. It was 1-inch flat bar. I just cut into 1/4-inch pieces. And then so there's the nut, so that it actually fits in there really good. I did a pretty good job on that. How I did that is I just set that down, put the key stock on there, and just set the tool on there, and then just made sure they were tight and tacked them, and then I took it off and just welded it up and then ground it down. It was pretty easy. So that's that. So now this only fits on there one way now, so I just made sure I put the key in the right spot. Wherever the key is, there it is. So we'll do it like that. And then our nut just goes on like that, and it's serrated, so it should not be a problem as far as tightening it on there. Make sure it didn't start. Let's make sure it started this time. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now I just got to get a wrench on it. We'll use this monster. Yeah. Voila. There's our bracket. So that's what it'll look like from outside the car. It looks pretty good. It sits like that. So I might touch up the paint on it. I scratched it apparently doing all that wrestling with it. But anyway, so that's that. So now I just have to install it. Make sure our length is right. If it's not, we'll adjust that nut back. And then we probably have to cut it off because we can't have the rod sticking through there. So I'm just going to put it on there and put like a nut on it, and we'll see where it's at there. This is a real technical install here. You go like this. Oh, I got my brake pedal pushed all the way back right now, so I got that fork in there. So then we just gotta push that in like that. You think you can handle that? It's pretty easy. So now I just put the nuts on the inside and put my pin back in, and we should be good to go. Okay, here we are. We're just gonna put it back together just like we took it apart. It should work out pretty good. I think our depth is actually about perfect. So good thing I made it long, because I thought I was making it. I thought I was making it long, and it turned out to be just about right. I'm not going to put the key in it yet. We'll just put all the nuts back on it. If you're doing this on something else, I apologize that yours is not going to be as easy to do as this one is. Because I've never put a booster in a car that was easier to get to than this. Okay, so our pin is in. We don't have a master cylinder on it yet. We are hitting our brake light just fine. So actually that sucked it in a little bit, so our rod may be a little bit long yet. And that's okay, we can shorten it, that's no big deal. Turn around so I don't stare at your butt. Thank you. Okay, so we got it in, and it worked out. The only thing we may have to shorten the rod once we get it running. If you got one of these out of a wrecking yard, you would still have the rod in there with the spring, which would actually be the preferable, almost the preferable way to do it, you know, but you're taking the gamble on the unit being good or not. Most likely it is. These things don't really go bad. That's why they're so expensive to buy them. You know, if these went bad all the time, they would be a lot cheaper to buy them. Trust me. So anyway, so that's as far as I'm going to get on this thing for this episode. But if you are doing this swap and you just moved your master cylinder out, took your booster out, and you put this booster in, and you want to put it back together, it should work that way. I mean, everything should be the same. Your bolt pattern should be the same. Your offset and everything's the same. There's not really many differences. The only, if you're doing this on a Jeep or something, I believe your bore will fit. You won't have any problems with it that way. I'm trying to think of anything you'd run into. You definitely have to check the length of the rod inside, but I think that should be okay for you there too. So this line here with the white cap goes to your power steering pump now. So you'll disconnect your box to your pump, and this replaces it. And then this line here will go down to your box. So the outside one towards the outside of the car, power steering box, inside one, power steering pump. And then the box is hooked. This is how your box gets pressurized now, is from here. And then your return line, which is the yellow, you'll have to tee it into the return line that came off of your steering box. So you'll cut that line, put a brass tee in it, 3/8 brass line, run some transmission cooler line down to it. Probably a good time to replace that return line off the box as well. I just use power transmission cooler line. That works good. So that's that. It's really simple. It's a really simple setup. You'll like it. It feels like manual brakes that are easy to push. I mean, that's the best as I can describe them. I like these a lot better. And then if the box is in still good working order, if the engine were to stall, you still got a good one good push. Bob just fell off the car. That was pretty funny. You got one good push still. It holds pressure in this cylinder here. So you'll still have power brakes for a push even if the engine wasn't running. Kind of like you do on vacuum brakes if that system's working well too. So that's that. Stay tuned. Next week we're going to build the cross member, or later this week actually, we're going to build the cross member with our bearing, steering support bearing. So we'll get that done. And then hopefully we'll get our brackets and stuff next week. So we can put all our brackets on and serpentine system. And then we'll start building lines. So we got 2 episodes next week. 1 episode the end of this week, hopefully, if everything goes well. So end of this week, cross member. Beginning of next week will be serpentine system. End of next week we'll be running all our lines. We got steering cylinder on this one, so we got extra lines. We got 4 ports on our box down here. So we got those lines to make too. So stay tuned. It should be, like I say, it's pretty fun weeks. This finishing stuff, can be fun if you let it be fun, or it can be terrible if you're just too excited to get the car running. It does take a bunch of time. So anyway, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.